This is the story of two brothers serving their country at the most elite level, fighting evil, protecting our freedom, until the wounds of war threatened. It's a story we hear too often. Servicemen and women, veterans, fighting the demons of war long after the battlefield, escaping the trauma with drugs or with alcohol, dependent on pharmaceuticals to numb the pain, tragically turning to suicide as a way out. So what can we do? These two brothers, the men and women who serve our nation, give their all, write a blank check to America up to and including their lives. Yet they're bled drop by drop, suffering from post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries with nowhere to turn. Until now. Take a look.
My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm a former Special Forces Green Beret. My specialty was explosives, demolitions, and so that had me in and around countless explosions through the entirety of my career. What that resulted in was a medical retirement from what we now know were multiple traumatic brain injuries.
Joining me now is CEO of Warrior Angels Foundation, Special Forces Green Beret Andrew Moore, and former Army Apache helicopter pilot and co-founder of Warrior Angels Foundation, Adam Moore. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hey Liz, thanks for having us on.
Good to be here.
Of course, thanks for being here. All right, let's start at the beginning of this story. Let's start with your military service. So Andrew first, then Adam. Tell me, how long did you each serve?
Well, we were both started in the Army in 2006 through different paths, and I was medically retired in 2015, so about 9 years in Special Forces, and Adam can tell you about his.
Yep, we both came in the Army about the same time. Andrew went the Special Forces route, and then I went the helicopter route. And then about 9 years in is when he had his injury, and that he was being medically retired. And so that's when we kind of made the decision that, hey, some people needed help, and that's when we made the decision to leave the Army and go and do this.
Sure. Okay, Andrew, so your brother just mentioned that you were injured. This is obviously a critical part to this story. Tell us about that. First of all, how were you injured?
Yeah, so it was a number of traumatic brain injuries over time, and we didn't know the correlation from head injuries to the symptoms that stem from that. And so it was difficult to make those correlations. Like, is this because of the head injuries, the explosive blast waves that you're around as a life of an operator, or is it just because you emotionally can't take it anymore? And that was kind of what we were dealing at. But you can suffer a traumatic brain injury without being knocked unconscious. And I was only knocked unconscious once in my career, so it happens from a multitude of different areas.
Right, so what was your trajectory then? You mentioned that symptoms began to manifest. What happened to you?
So after my last deployment in 2013, I didn't have any symptoms till about 3 or 4 months later. And I went from being an elite performer to waking up, finding myself on 13 medications. I was alcoholic, and my drinking had gotten so out of control that my wife, who was 9 months pregnant, had to ask me if I could keep my drinking down for the day in case she went to labor and couldn't drive herself to the hospital. So, from very quickly, my life spiraled out of control. And it's not special or specific to me. This is happening to a lot of people in the community.
Right, that's heartbreaking. And Adam, for you as his brother, what was it like for you to see him go from elite warrior from Special Forces to deteriorating to the point, like he said, where his wife had to ask him to stay sober for one day when their child was born?
Yeah, it was very difficult. Growing up, Andrew, in our whole lives, 2 years older than me, so growing up, that's a pretty big gap. I looked up to him my whole life, and he was always going out, achieving, doing great things. So his career in the Army was no different. To see him go from the pinnacle of success down to the trenches of despair, it was very foreign to me. It was hard to understand. I thought, man, he's just going off the deep end. He needs to get it together. I remember specifically when the full force of everything he was dealing with hit me, because he called me up on the phone and was like, I answered it. I said, hey man, how's it going? How you doing? And I just hear sobbing on the other end of the phone. And that concerned me greatly, because I was like, all right, who died? What's going on? This is a guy I haven't seen cry since he was, 8 years old and I was 6 years old, for all intents and purposes. So I was, just speechless. Didn't know what to do, didn't know where to turn. He came back from his deployment with, all his limbs.
And that's the difficult part about it, right? Is that it's invisible. You can't see it, even with the imaging that we do in the brain. We can't see the inflammation that's built up that's causing these problems. So, it is a hard thing to grasp, even for the individual, much less the family member. That's
Right,
where it was
and you
at.
mentioned that you were on 13 medications, so clearly doctors were just giving you things to try to numb the pain, the same that I mentioned in the introduction. So what did you do? At this point, Adam, that he'd called you sobbing, that you knew that this medication route was not working, Andrew, that you knew you had to get help. What did you do? You felt hopeless. Where do you turn?
Yeah, we went looking for answers outside the system, and that led us to a top neuroendocrinologist at the Millennium Health Centers in Encino, California, Dr. Gordon. And he is able to run an objective blood test to find out if somebody's deficient in these important chemicals that are produced in the brain called neurosteroids. And that is a result of head trauma. So when you have head trauma, you have the swelling of the brain, and that will make somebody become deficient or insufficient in these. And so if you become deficient or insufficient, and we can identify that and then replace or replenish those hormones back to physiological levels, people get better. And that's in the scientific literature. That's shown in the clinical application through 1,300 cases, 120 of which the Warrior Angels Foundation has helped veterans come back to life.
And Liz, before he got better, before that point where we said, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to try and find the answers that we're not getting. Like, this is a guy that was very robotic in his mannerisms. His personality, like everything he was before, was gone, and that's because parts of the brain were turned off. He was a shell of the person he was. And so through that,
you know, 2 years ago, I was having panic attacks. I couldn't go out in public. I had crying spells. I got such bad blurry vision that went to double vision that had all kinds of balance issues. Quality of life was zero. And so what's important we're able to show here, Liz, is we can take the veterans where they're at, and they can go from no quality of life to having quality of life. Without the VA, without the government, we figured out a way to bring world-class care to the veteran without any red tape and bureaucracy.
Right, it's miraculous. Just sitting here listening to this, I get the chills listening to your story because look at you now.
Right.
It's amazing. It's remarkable. So tell me though, for veterans who may be listening, who know someone or themselves are suffering from the same things that you've been suffering, what's the first step? Where do they go? How does this treatment work?
I challenge everybody out there to do two things. One, if you're affected by these symptoms of traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress, raise your hand and say, I need to get help. I need to get something going, get the ball rolling. Step two would be to come to our website, waftbi.org. We have a plethora of information. If you want to get involved, we have a plethora of information for you to get involved. We run off charitable contributions, but most importantly, for the veteran or service member out there, you can find out all the information. You can fill out our information to receive support, and we will support you.
Right, and that's WAFTBI, as you can see on the screen, .org. Really do go check this out. Help people. They've had incredible success with this. 120 people whose lives you've given back, that this doctor has been able to give back by science that's not integrated yet into the VA or the DoD healthcare plans. Hopefully will be at some point, isn't yet. But let me ask you both. This is upcoming to Memorial Day weekend. You've both been through a lot. You know what it means to serve. You know what it means to sacrifice, not just in the traditional sense of the term, but you've sacrificed a lot. Would you both do it all again?
oh, of course. It's the best decision I've ever made.
Without a doubt. We believe in doing the right thing, not for promise of reward or for fear of punishment, but because it's the right thing to do. Serving was the right thing to do. We didn't do it for a pat on the back or for a ticker tape parade. It was what we needed to do.
And if we hadn't done it, if you hadn't had the injuries that you had, if we hadn't found the solutions that we found, we wouldn't be here today with an answer and an ability to help everybody else out there that's struggling with the same things.
Absolutely.
And it's not just, it's so much wider than the veteran community. It's the NFL, it's extreme sports, it's general day-to-day. So right now we're affecting where we can, and that's the veteran populace because they're hurting, they need this, so yeah.
Right, and I know you say you're not looking for glory, and the better part of valor is discretion, but in my book, you both are heroes, you both are wonderful, your story is remarkable. Andrew Marr, Adam Marr, Warrior Angels Foundation, thank you both for being here, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you very much, Liz.